Item number 3, again, Mr. Remsburg.
All right, promise this is the last time this evening. All right, the next request, if I can get here, is from AWM Property Management. This company has requested that 4.88 acres that it owns or has recently purchased at 28999 NC 2427 Highway in Albemarle be rezoned from RA Residential Agricultural to HB Highway Business. Property is currently zoned RA. The lots immediately surrounding the property are generally zoned RA, which includes the Agri-Civic Center property, which of course is owned by the county. Areas nearby are zoned NB, Neighborhood Business, and GB, General Business. The GB lot on the south side, and I'll go to this, diagonally across from the Agri-Civic Center was rezoned by the county commissioners last, let's see, when was that? Last January, I believe. Early 2018 for vehicle body repair shop. That's still not constructed, but that's the zoning for that parcel that's in red on this map. Another lot zoned RA across the south side of NC 2427 is owned by Harvest Church for future development of a church at that location. Property currently has 2 homes in very poor condition, which according to AWM Property Management are to be removed as they work to market that site. They do not have a current, to my knowledge anyway, anyone currently or any plans currently for that site. HB District does, of course, serve for general highway business traveler needs, and they're generally located just on the outskirts of towns. Attorney General Jim Phillips, representing AWM Property, indicated that there were no plans at this point. Again, same transportation data basically, because we're just not too far from Frog Pond with this. 2017 data reveals about 16,000 vehicles per day traverse this section of the highway, and just like most things along the 2427 corridor, it is in the Stanley County land use plan as a growth area. Mr. Keith Parsley, I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but he did express some concern. He's located on the property adjacent just to the east of this parcel, and was concerned, of course, about the buffering between and potentially the value that may affect his property by being right next to a commercially zoned parcel. Of course, that could have a positive or negative effect, and the planning board worked to try to explain that to him. The board, in their consideration last month, ended up voting 5-1 to recommend approval of this request to rezone based on it being in a growth area in the land use plan and near other areas that are zoned for business or owned by the church, and of course being adjacent to the Agri-Civic Center and not far from the community college. Ms. Brasington was the dissenting vote. Her concern was the effect on Mr. Parsley and the impact it may have on his property and further encroachment on the neighborhood, which is near Tom Thumb Road.
Thank you, Mr. Remsburg. Any questions from the board?
And I did not show you the aerial view, but it is mostly a wooded lot with those, what remains of those 2 houses on the lot. And it's actually 2 lots, but it's all joined together. But there's a larger view if you want to see that for the zoning.
Thank you. I have one question before you sneak away. The drawings we have in our book don't have these pink or purple, I'm not good with colors, sorry.
Okay.
Dashed lines.
Oh, sure.
What are those?
What are those
that
things?
One
Okay.
intersects that property line at the back.
Sure.
There.
Great question. If you on GIS, if you click the button that says lot lines, you're going to get these dashed lines, and what they generally are is where at one point the property was divided, or as many cases, like if you look back there on Scaly Bark, you see these evenly dashed lines every 50 feet or so. Especially back in a quick explanation, back in the 1940s, 30s, 50s, that time period, what they tended to do when they created a subdivision was to create small sections of lots, and you could buy as many as you could afford. And that's where they put the final line. But if you see these, you can go all around the county and you'll see, well, even the bottom right of this map, you can see all these little dashed lines. And it was just the opportunity for the developer to say, well, if you can buy 25 more feet, you can come this far, and 25 more, and so your lot could be increased. It's kind of a residual thing from the past, but it shows old lot lines, or if something's been subdivided and then recombined or something, that dash line will remain.
Thank you, Mr.
Good question.
Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
What did you say that property is going to be rezoned for?
It would be HB, highway business. So that,
You know what's going to be there?
there's no plan use that I'm aware of. I know Mr. Phillips is here. He may be able to address that. But I'm not aware. Right, right. Because, of course, by the zoning standards, anything that's HB would be allowed that's in that zoning district.
Any other questions from Commissioner? I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anybody here to speak for or against? Mr. Phillips?
Mr. Chairman and County Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity. I'll be brief. It's my understanding that this property is owned by AWM Property Management LLC, which is a North Carolina limited liability company that has a business office in Oakboro. One of the principals is Mr. Anthony Wayne Marks. Unfortunately, he's not here tonight, and he's asked if I would step up and inform the commissioners as follows. One is, as you've heard, there's no immediate plan to what this property is going to be used for, except as follows. It's my understanding that the buildings on there are in a very, very dilapidated condition, and they need to be taken down, and the site needs to be cleaned up so it would be suitable for some purpose down the road. And Mr. Marks has informed me that that's something that is on early on his calendar, and that should it be rezoned, he would like to do that. There are no plans or clandestine purposes for this. There's no offer to purchase and contract with any third party. There's no written agreement or oral agreement I know of to sell this to any particular person or entity at this time. It's something that he just hoped to market. And so a great question would be what's going to be on that property, and other than being cleaned up, I unfortunately don't have an answer to that. It's my understanding too that when this property was purchased by this particular LLC, that it was in two parcels or two different deed descriptions, and those, there was a new survey, and I presented that to the planning director over at the planning board meeting, and it shows it basically as a one track or parcel, and I've not been informed that there's any desire at this time to subdivide it or try to break it down into any subparts. Also, I would say, I would think the county would be very, very familiar with this property, because on two sides, I believe the property is actually owned or in the lawful possession of Stanley County. So you certainly would have a great deal of familiarity with it. And the last thing I would say about this is that Mr. Marks is a person who owns numerous properties here in Stanley County through some companies, and also has projects in other places. And I'm sure you've heard this before, that he can do more profitable projects in other areas, but he wants to do something for his home county. And I hope that whatever this property is utilized for would be something that would A, increase the tax base, B, attracted to the county, and be something that might be coordinated with the Agri-Civic Center use and bring economic opportunity. But since he doesn't have a definite plan as to what that particular future use is, I don't have anything extra to add to that, but he does seem very serious about trying to find a reputable person to use this property for a productive purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Anybody else to speak for or against?
Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Lawhorn.
If we approve this for general business, and this is for Mr. Remsburg, the property lines that are attached to other property owners, isn't there a requirement for a privacy fence, 6-foot privacy fence? If we so desire as a property owner?
Correct. So Yeah, the zoning ordinance requires a 10-foot vegetative buffer between a commercial, any commercial property and any residential property. It could be replaced with a substantial fence that you can't see through, so an opaque fence situation of X number of height, depending on how far back on the lot you are. But yes, there would be a buffer or a break between the two. It can be waived. There's a part in the ordinance that allows that if the adjoining landowner says, I don't care, I don't want it, I'll write a letter to the owner, basically establishing that we don't need a buffer. It'd be fine, I don't care. Then what, if they send that letter or establish that agreement, then the buffer is not required. Good question.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Furr.
I would like, what is, can be put there? What is some of the things that can be put there?
Well, I don't know that I want to pull the book out totally, but it's it's a long list. If you picture, I mean, obviously convenience store, hotel, motel type situation. I'm gonna get to section 608 or something. In every business, I'm getting there. Here we go. Animal hospital, assembly halls, parking lots, automobile parts and supplies, automobile rental, automobile sales and display lots, washing establishments, banks, bar beauty shops. I mean, it's a long list. Greenhouses, motels and motor lodges, nursery schools, kindergartens, recreational facilities, restaurants, mini storage warehouses, theaters, that sort of thing. So, of course, I will admit, from the planning department side, you'd really like to see a hotel or motel there, or some sort of conference center. But it could. I mean, that's the other catch, is because this is general rezoning, so it could be any of those things. You know, we aren't going to specify that or restrict what AWM Property Management could do with this, but yes, hotel was certainly a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Remsburg. Any further questions from the commissioners? What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Furr.
I make the motion to go ahead and approve it.
Motion by Commissioner Furr.
I'm assuming that on this 24-27 on the land use. For property managed on 28,999, expenses 24-27, because of the location of the road. Being described by the current Stanley County use plan, being located near the Civic Aid Center, for commercial use, promote economic development for our county.
Thank you, Commissioner Furr. Motion, is there a second? Second by Commissioner Jordan. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. Item number 4 is the W.K. Dixon Design Service Contract for the wastewater treatment plant. Presenter, Mr. Wingo.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good evening. W.K. Dixon has submitted amendment number 2 to the existing design services contract for our West Stanley wastewater treatment plant upgrade. This amendment is for additional design services to increase the wastewater treatment plant capacity to 1.2 million gallons per day. Because of excessive flows at the wastewater treatment plant due to inflow and infiltration, NCDEQ has increased the design peaking factors in the design from 2.5 to 3.6. This increase in the peaking factor has required us to do additional design services, or require additional design services to increase the chlorine contact tank, effluent pumps, and headworks to achieve a new rated treatment capacity of 1.2 million gallons per day. The total amount of the additional design services is $95,000. Staff recommends approval of the WK Dixon Amendment Number 2 Design Services Contract. Upon bidding the project, Stanley County will seek additional funding through NCDEQ SRF to finance the total cost of design and construction. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commissioners? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Morgan.
I move that we approve WK Dixon Amendment Number 2, Design Services Contract.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Barbie. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5 is the radio tower design build contract. Presenter, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the members of the board. The county elected to utilize the design build method of delivery for the construction of a new emergency communications systems radio tower on NC 2427 East, behind what will be the new East Side Volunteer Fire Department. We're still working to get that legally possessed in our name, that piece of property, but we're close. The county received 4 responses to the request for qualifications. Those came from Motorola, Infinity, Allstate Tower, and Tower Engineering Professionals. Upon review, staff recommends utilizing Motorola as a design-build contractor for the project. The recommendation is based on the following factors. Motorola has already designed and developed a construction cost estimate for the project. And this will save significant time towards construction, and we want to move this project along. Obviously, the longer it takes, the longer we're in a situation where we do have gaps in radio coverage in the eastern part of our county. Consistency and compatibility with the county's existing towers and digital system. Obviously, that's a real imperative that we get that right. Because it's such an integral link between the 911 center, our first responders on the ground, and we want to make sure that there's compatibility between this tower and the electrical and electronics and our other towers. And then the experience working with our county inspections and emergency management personnel, given that they were the ones who provided or constructed the towers and the 3 towers that we built, as well as integrating the 4th Viper Tower at the community college. So with those 3 factors in mind, staff is asking the board to review and consider approval of Motorola as the design build contractor and authorize staff to enter into a contract as in the best interest of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Mr. Lucas, looking at the property, if you're facing the property from 2427, where will that tower be located on that property?
It will be, if you're looking at that property, it'll be in the back left-hand corner. There's a knoll there that sits up. If you recall, we actually had money in the budget this year to help with the site prep. We're currently close to bidding that site prep, so we'll be taking a road off the backside of where East Side's parking lot will be, and that road will go up to the tower site. And those are always just gravel roads. And then, so that in this year's budget, we have funds that will allow us to grade that road, gravel it, and then prep the site. Then Motorola will come in and build the tower, do the footings, and construct it and hook on the electronics. So that site sits back in the left-hand corner of that, up on a knoll. We did soil testing as part of the thing. So what we didn't want to do is take a piece of land and then we find out that it's not great. It wasn't a great site, or we hit rock or whatever, and it increased the cost. So we felt like if we did those soil tests ahead of time, we would be able to narrow down the specific piece of acreage we wanted, And that would also help Motorola or whoever we use to do the construction of this, be able to give us a better cost estimate for the construction of the tower. And that's proven to be the case.
One other question. I've never been to one of these tower sites. I think I've seen them as I'm driving through Stanley County, but are these sites fenced in to where nobody can get in there unless they have key access?
Yes, there's key access. The one at Tuckertown, obviously, you have to actually get in the gate for the wastewater treatment plant first, and then you go. Then you have to get through. So that one's locked right there at the street. The one in Norwood, there's an actual physical gate that you have to open up, and then there's a fenced-in compound around the tower site that you have to have a key in order to access. The one in Locust, you can drive in on the road. I think there's a chain fence there, but you can drive in. But then again, there's a fenced-in compound around the tower site itself, and the same thing at the Viper site at the community college. So this will be the same way. You'll be able to drive back there, but you're not going to be able to get into the tower site. It'll have it's at least an 8-foot fence around it with concertina wire at the top to keep folks out of that tower site. And we have a maintenance contract, so the folks come and visit those sites on a monthly basis to make sure everything's working properly. They test the generators, all those things are happening on a consistent basis, and we contract for that on an annual basis.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Lucas. Do we have a bid yet on construction of this?
It's a design build, so they will give us we pick the design, the contractor, and then they give us a bid, similar to what we did with the EMS base. We picked DR Reynolds, and DR Reynolds is still working on that cost estimate. Motorola is pretty close to finalizing their cost estimate. It's my intention to use fund balance, so we don't have to borrow the money. I believe it's going to be in the neighborhood of $1.16 million to do this tower. That's turnkey, everything. It'll include the design services, the whole works. So at some point in the next month or two, we'll be coming back to you with a project budget to do a budget amendment and recognize those funds out of fund balance, and then that will move forward with constructing that tower.
I was just wondering how we picked out of the fourth, but if you have a bid or anything.
No, we didn't do that. These aren't actual bids; are based on qualifications, and so it's a design build. So whoever we pick as the general contractor to build it, they come up with they work to develop a cost estimate, and then we negotiate around that cost in terms of how do we bring that into a number that we could live with. And then anytime there's savings in those design build contracts, they put a number on a not to exceed, and if there's any savings, we share in that savings on those contracts.
I just have one question.
Mr. Moore?
Do we have any idea, like, once the site is graded, how long it takes for the construction of the tower, I guess?
If my recollection serves me, once the site was graded and in this case Motorola goes out to build these towers, I want to say somewhere in the 3 to 6 month time frame for the tower to go vertical and the electronics to be put on it and all the testing to occur.
Any other questions?
A lot of that will depend on how quickly they can order steel and all that kind of stuff.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lawson?
I would like to make a motion that we approve Motorola as the design build contractor for the county's new radio tower and authorize staff to enter into a contract that is in the best interest of the county.
Motion by Commissioner Lawhon. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Morgan. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. Item number 6 is the recommended budget presentation this evening. We'll give County Manager Lucas just a few minutes to set up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's my pleasure this evening to present to you the manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 19-20. And before I get started, I just want to say thank you to all the staff that were involved in the development of this budget. This process actually started back in March at your board retreat. It actually started before that, as staff was developing revenue targets and other things to be able to present to you at that retreat to help you get a better understanding of where we might be from a forecasting perspective as we entered into this budget year. And so a lot of department head interaction. Toby, our finance director, and Melissa Eford, Emily in HR, just there a tremendous amount of work goes into not only developing a recommendation, but all the documents that go along with this and all the data that has to be entered into a system to make this work. So I just want to thank them for all their hard work. Just an overview of what's in your book that you have this evening. And these books will also be at each of the libraries, as well as there's a copy here at the commissioner's, at the central office if folks want to come by and see it, or if someone wanted to get a copy. It's also online. They can go out online and get it. It'll be online tomorrow morning. But if someone wanted to see a physical copy, it will be in each of the branches of the library. But you'll see a recommended budget in brief as sort of the first 2 pages. It sort of just gives you a real high-level summary of your goals, your strategies, your vision, and just some general information about the highlights of the budget. Then there's a transmittal letter that's about 10 or 12 pages long that gives you a lot of nuts and bolts about recommendations that were made in the budget, our revenues, expenses, position requests, positions that were funded, capital requests, recommendations in terms of what's recommended on those capital requests, both capital improvement and technology, education. It goes into a lot of detail. Then there's a couple spreadsheets. One just sort of shows you the recommended numbers by each department as compared to the adopted budget last year. Another one shows you something similar, but it also shows you the revenue, so you understand how many county dollars are actually in those different programs and services. For example, inspections. Inspections doesn't require any property tax revenue because the fees that they gather cover the cost of that service. Register of Deeds. Register of Deeds costs very limited county dollars, actually sales tax or property tax, because most of the fees they collect cover the cost of that. It's not 100% covered by fees that they collect, but it's close. And so you kind of get a better sense of what services are costing the county taxpayers, what's 100% versus some percentage thereof. You'll also see a property tax receipt in there. Basically, that shows you as a homeowner of a just sort of on average, the average home in Stanley County, what their property, how their property tax is broken out on a monthly basis. So if I believe it was about almost $1,400 a year in taxes, you can see on a monthly basis how that $1,400 is being allocated to the different programs and services the county funds. So it really gives the taxpayer a better idea when they say to you, how is my money being utilized? You can basically be able to show them, here's a property tax receipt. And we include this in our recommended budget as well as our adopted budget so the public has a better understanding where their money's going. And then there's also, they'll see, and the next thing we'll see is a spreadsheet that contains the department head requested and the manager recommended enhancements. So these are all the things that departments asked for above and beyond what they had in this year's budget. And so you can kind of get a general sense of new positions, more money for computers, more money for maintenance, more money for whatever it may be, uniforms, you name it, they're in there by department, and you can see those enhancements and what they requested and what was recommended. I want to say that the enhancements were like 4-point-something million, and we've recommended about 1.6 of that. And so you can kind of get a sense of what departments are asking for. Then there's some line item revenue and expense by each department, and you'll see those for every single department that the county has in program and service. And then there's a recommended fee schedule. And in that recommended fee schedule, we've taken the time to highlight in yellow those fees that were where a department has requested a change in fee, in most instances an increase, and the manager has recommended that same fee increase. Then there's also fees that are highlighted in green. Those are fees that I have, as manager in the matter of recommended budget, I may have differed from what the department had asked for. I may have given them slightly lower than what they asked for, or I may have given them something different than what they asked for. But so the yellows reflect where a department has asked for a fee increase or decrease, and the manager's recommendation matches that department head's request. Green is there is a change from the previous year, but it may not necessarily match what the department head's requested. So that's sort of an overview of what you'll find in your budget book. The bottom line is there's no recommended tax increase. This would be the 13th consecutive year that the board has held the tax rate at 67 cents if the board adopts this budget without a tax increase or increasing it from 67 cents. There's significant increases in education funding in this budget. There's increased public safety funding for personnel and vehicles. There's several capital outlay and technology enhancements in this budget. And there are additional resources to retain and attract talent for our local government. Because it's imperative that we have good people working for us. That helps to make sure that we're being innovative, helps to make sure we're having outstanding customer service, so your phone does not ring as often about issues or concerns that people may see from their local government and their interaction with us. If you look at what was requested versus what was recommended, that's a difference of $10.95 million. That's 22 cents on the current recommended tax rate of 67 cents. So if you were to fund everything that was requested in this budget, you would have to raise taxes 22 cents. That's the reality of what we're trying to balance here. And folks have said, well, maybe even a 5-cent tax increase. 5 cents would generally generate about $2.4 million. So, I've heard folks say, well, we need an extra $2 million for this service or that service. Well, an extra $2 million is raising taxes 5 cents. And so for the average homeowner, average home being about $175,000, that's only $88 a year. And that sounds simple. For folks like myself who are blessed, have good job, have stability, $88 is not a whole lot. But we have so many folks in our population that are on fixed income. And I was visiting my elderly parents this weekend, and it sort of drove home. And they're very blessed to have retirement and pensions, but not everybody. They were telling me not everybody they interact with is in that same situation. And we have that same issue here in Stanley County, where we have an aging population, and folks are getting older, and we have rising property values around some of these folks who have owned their homes for a number of years. So inherently their values are going up, and so a tax increase for some of us is we could bear that burden, but unfortunately, that's not that's not a reality for a lot of folks who live in our community. And then the other piece of that is we're looking at a project, an economic development project, Blue Sky. If you were to raise taxes 5 cents, that company would pay an additional $170,000 a year in taxes if you raise taxes 5 cents. So I think that's the other thing you really have to look at is one of our advantages we have right now over other counties in our region is the fact that our tax rate and our tax burden is relatively low. We have one of the lower tax burdens and lower tax rates in our region. So it's imperative that we maintain that economic advantage. And so by raising taxes, yes, it sounds easy, but it really has a burden. It places a burden on businesses, and it places a burden on our elderly, as well as our agricultural operations, who are being stretched, especially in this, where we had so much rain, and we've had, it's not a great economy. Commodity prices for corn and other things are not great right now, and so, you're putting an extra burden on those agricultural operations the more you tax their land. So I think it's imperative that you really look at and strike a balance when folks say, hey, we could just raise taxes a couple cents. It's not. I think you really need to look at the choices and consequences associated with that. But you can see here, what was recommended versus what was requested. Chairman or Commissioner Jordan, I'll be more than happy to, if you want to hold that question, I'll answer them all at the end, just so that we can get through the presentation. Just sort of gives you a multi-year illustration of our budget. Certainly it's gone up. You can kind of see coming out of a recession back in 11-12. We have grown as revenues have increased. The budget has increased. That $67.6 million, that's a 5% increase over last year, which sounds fairly, seems high. But if you take out the Article 46 sales tax, that additional quarter-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters, then the increase is only 2.6%. CPI was about 1.95, so it's not significantly more than what the consumer price index was. If you back out that quarter-cent sales tax that the voters voted in, and that money is included in this budget. It's about $46.7 million in county dollars, so if you subtract out the revenue that we'll get from other sources other than property taxes and sales tax. The $4.96 billion in assessed value, that's a $122 million increase in assessed value, 2.8%. Fund balance appropriation recommended is $1.74 million. $1.17 million of that, 68%, is tied to one-time capital outlay and technology purchases, including one-time capital outlay recommendations for the Stanley County school system. And that 67%, 68%, pretty much it's been standard for us in terms of the amount of fund balance that's tied to one-time capital. And we've tried to do that purposely because you don't want to necessarily live on balancing your budget with fund balance. So if you're going to do it, try to tie as much of that as to one-time capital items or one-time items, so that the following year, if he wasn't there, you can back those things out and they're not helping to fund operations. In terms of education, recommending a $1 million increase to the regular current expense line item in the school's budget, $500,000 for the special current expense, and that's the Article 44 sales tax. That's different than the 46, which is the quarter cent. Article 44 is a state sales tax that was approved by the state and trickles down to the counties, and it has to be used for economic development or education. And so we use part of it. We're recommending, I think we're looking at $670,000 from that sales tax this year. $500,000 is recommended for the schools. The other $170,000, $110,000 of it is tied to the Riverstone debt service payment, which we have 2 more years of, and then the remaining $60,000 is recommended to offset our grants for business and industry for investments they have made. If they invest and they meet their targets, then we provide them a grant of a certain percentage of their taxes, and so that $60,000 is going to help offset that cost to us. Recommending an additional $25,000 for the teacher supplement grant, which would boost that up to $314,000, and $620,000 in additional capital outlay. And so I feel like that's, we've given us a significant increase in funding to education. It's certainly nowhere near the conversation we had with the school board and with some of the school board members, because they didn't I don't believe they really officially took action, but what they told us to put in the requested budget, it's not there. It certainly is not anywhere close, but I do believe it's sustainable, and it's something that we can move forward with, and we can work with them and try to incrementally increase it year to year. But this is a substantial increase in funding for the school system from where they are today. And then 40% increase in current expense and operating $500,000 for the community college. And that really is to help them with some one-time things on their campus this year, deferred maintenance and other things that they're planning on, and then sort of as a placeholder, so as we move forward with the discussion we had about a new building, that $500,000 could be used to offset that debt service moving into the 2021 fiscal year and beyond. Where's the money go? And so you can kind of see the categories. $84 million, or 84% of the county funding goes to mandated services. So I know you all hear a lot of times, why do we fund this, or why do you have to fund that? 84% of the dollars you have go to stuff that we have to fund. And so that's $56.8 million. That's the jail, debt, DSS, EMS, sheriff, education. So, you don't have a whole lot of flexibility at 16% of your budget that you have any discretion over in terms of how you fund. 76% of your funding goes to 3 categories: education, health and human services, and public safety. So 3/4 of your budget's going to those 3 categories of services. And 38% of your local dollars, 38% of your sales tax and property tax money that our citizens invest in our local government, 38% of that, almost $4 in $10, is going to education. So human capital, I'm recommending a 2.5% in COLA for our employees. That would be effective July 1st. a $50,000 increase for merit funding that we do in January of each year, and that's based on performance evaluations and making sure there's a satisfactory performance evaluation before you get that increase. I am recommending 6 new full-time positions, and 2 part-time positions are recommended, continuing in the wellness clinic for our employees, as well as continuing the health insurance gain sharing plan that we have in place. The 6 new positions, 3 of those are in social services, child nutrition, and a Medicaid a services worker, as well as a child protective services. 1 position is for the sheriff's office and for sexual offender monitoring. I feel like we need to do a better job. There's a lot of registered sex offenders in Stanley County, and there's a lot of registered sex offenders in all the counties around us, but we don't really have a dedicated resources to making sure that we're going around and checking on those sex offenders. I think it's imperative to protect our children, that we have a deputy that's specifically assigned to following up on those registered sex offenders. And in a lot of respects, it kind of creates a community policing model too, because that person's going to be in neighborhoods knocking on doors, and you're going to see that presence. So I think it serves 2 purposes. There's also a full-time fire inspector that I'm recommending, and that's partly because of the increase in volume of permits and building that's going on. And to help offset the cost of that, we're reducing. They have 3 part-time employees now. We would reduce that by 1 so that we'd lose a part-time employee but gain a full-time employee. And so major budgetary expenditure changes, they increase. You can see the increase for schools and schools capital outlay and the community college, the cost for the COLA, the cost for health insurance premiums to maintain health insurance premiums for county employees at no cost for those premiums. There is a cost for dependent care. If we don't increase the dependent care, though, the cost to the county is going to go up, and so it's imperative that we take a look at that and make sure that those that do choose to cover dependents, that they're paying their fair share. There's also, the state has mandated an increase in the North Carolina local government retirement system. So the county has to match a certain percentage of every employee's salary that goes into the retirement system for that defined benefit pension that we receive. And so because there's a baby boomers and we have so many folks retiring, it's putting more strain on the retirement system. And so the state has said, you need to increase your match. That cost to us is going to be $367,000 next year. We needed to increase for overtime for EMS because we underfunded that in 18-19. Increases for annualized merit from when we did it in January, so that was only half a year, and then the reduction in one-time capital outlay and technology from 18-19. So we've reduced those items and then put that money to work somewhere else in the budget. And you can kind of see capital outlay, those items in technology, those items that were $1,000 to $9,999. There were $52,000 in requests. We're recommending $31,000. And then those things 10,000 and greater, there were 1.7, almost 1.78 million in requested, and recommending 1.5. Keep in mind, 2 of those are large items: sheriff's office vehicle replacement and EMS, two EMS ambulance replacements. We won't see the cost of that in the 1920 budget. We will finance those, and then that initial debt service payment will come on in the 2021 budget. But that will also allow additional debt service that we have for sheriff vehicles to roll off, as well as EMS ambulances costs to roll off. So I'm recommending it's part of that 1.5, but you actually won't pay any of those dollars in this fiscal year. We'll finance them, purchase them, and that first debt service payment will be in July or August or September of 2020. So it won't have an impact on this year's budget. Just a revenue summary, the fund balance appropriated, I'm recommending a decrease. Again, I think it's imperative that we continue to try to bring down how much fund balance we're using to balance our budget. This year, we're down about, I think we were at 2.1, 2.2 last year, recommended about 1.7, so we're trying to bring that down. Sales tax is up, obviously, with the additional 1.5. We're looking at about 1.525 million that we anticipate from the sales tax, that additional quarter-cent sales tax. That's a lot of that 2.2% increase, or 2.2 percentage point increase. And then the ad valorem property tax decreased by 1.3 percentage points, partly because you got more sales tax coming in, which means you don't need as many property tax dollars. And so ad valorem tax, sales tax, intergovernmental revenue, which is money that we get for cost in senior services, DSS, health department, that and sales and services fees make up 93% of our total revenue. We have to increase the amount the county's having to put in to cover the employee-only costs, because we got to pay those claims somewhere.
Thank you, sir.
And these rates are still, obviously we try to fund it so that we're covering our cost. We've been using, this is a separate set of fund balance from the general fund balance. We have our own health insurance fund, and that has fund balance. 3 years ago, we were sitting on $2.8 million in fund balance in that fund, and we were able to not adjust rates and do things, but that's dwindled down to the point, I think we were at $1.7 million to start this fiscal year, and we're looking at having to spend another $500,000 out of that fund this year just to balance that budget. Because our claims are more than what we're spending. So, you're looking at getting it down to $1.2 to $1.1 million. Best practice suggests that you have at least 2 months of claims on hand. We're getting close to hitting that, to getting to that. So it was important that we do raise rates to make sure that our claims are going to be significant or adequately covered, because we can't continue to dip into that fund balance. If we exhaust that fund balance, then we're having to dip into the general fund, which is we definitely don't want to do. So,
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Brandon, have we ever looked at like multiple plans? I know different companies, some will have like higher deductibles for like dependents or family plans to help lower that cost, but then they take more responsibility, obviously.
we haven't looked at that as we've looked at it across the county as, do we want to look at offering county employees a couple different plans? Do we offer them they can continue to get their health insurance paid for free, the premiums, not the copays and deductibles, obviously, if they choose this level of plan, which has a higher deductible and has a higher copays. If they want a more robust, rich plan, then we would, they had to pay something, and so the county employee would have to pay it. And you could do the same thing for dependents. So it is something we certainly can look at. We just haven't done it yet because we've had a good fund balance, and we want to try to be honest with you, our health insurance has been a recruiting factor because our salaries are a little lower than counties around us. So the robust nature of our health insurance plan has always been something that employees really appreciate. So we've tried not to push any changes to that or any cost to the employee. The thing to keep in mind is that we also have a lot of employees who don't have dependents, and so if you don't raise these rates and you put more pressure on the employee that doesn't have dependents, it's really unfair to them. So we're trying to strike the balance is all. But that is something we can look at. We haven't because we're trying not to push those changes to our employees and make their benefits any less, because it is tough for us to compete against the unions and the Cabarrus and the Mecklen's for talent. Because our salaries are lower, and it's just we're never going to be able to compete. It won't happen. Those places have a higher tax base, and they so one of the things we've been able to do is offer a good health insurance benefit. So we've tried not to make changes, but it's something we're may have to look at in the future. Yes.
Any other questions? If not, what's the pleasure of the board this evening? Mr. Morgan.
I'll make the motion that we adopt the recommended biweekly health and dental insurance premium rates for employees and employee dependent care for 2019-2020.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan to accept the recommendation. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Furr. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. Item number 8 on the agenda is a resolution seeking high water levels and less fluctuation in water levels for Lake Tillery. I believe this is going to be the county manager.
Yeah, I don't think it has a landing place in any specific department, so I'll take the lead on this. This is actually something that when Bill and I were in Raleigh last Wednesday. Last Wednesday, there was some conversation with each of our members of our legislative delegation about this issue, about lake levels in Tillery. It's my understanding that our elected
Something good to have in the future. And I got to go last Thursday or 2 weeks ago. We went to the Officer Jeff Shelton Thin Blue Line dinner, and saw a lot of our sheriff employees won some awards, got some great recognition. So hats off to those guys out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Just a few things for me. I know Commissioner Lawhon, myself, County Manager Lucas are all planning to attend economic development kind of retreat function. The legislative reception in Raleigh coming up. I believe that's next week. I know RPO's coming up. It's a busy couple weeks coming up for almost all our committees. I know that's why most of us don't have reports, because they're coming up in the next 2 weeks. So economic development and all that's meeting tomorrow, and so busy week. But I appreciate all of y'all coming out and hearing the budget presentation tonight. I know that's why several of you were here. Appreciate you waiting. It will be online, like County Manager said, tomorrow morning. If you need copies of it, it's also available at the libraries and here at the county office. But if there is nothing else, there is something else. It's my fault. We forgot to approve the closed session minutes from last meeting. If you guys would turn those into Tyler and let her reissue those in our next agenda packet, we'll approve those at our next meeting.